let's talk about the idea of symbolism for a moment, by way of introduction. Many mitzvahs are explained using the idea of symbolism. X stands for Y. And it's important to understand that when we talk about symbolism, sometimes less is more. If I'm giving you a present which has intrinsic value, then the larger it is, the more expensive it is, the greater the gift. If the thing I'm giving you has symbolic value, maybe the opposite. Maybe the thing which is smaller, which is less expensive, may have greater meaning in terms of symbolism. So when I'm talking about symbolism, less is more. Let me give you an example of this. On Hanukkah, as we know that the bare bones requirement for Hanukkah candles is, the Talmud says, ner ishu beis. So every household should light a single candle. That's the basic minimum requirement. Mahadrin, people that beautify mitzvahs, ner l'chol echad v'echad. They light a candle each night for every member of the household. So if there are 3 people in the household, 3 candles each night. If there are 5 members of the household, 5 candles each night. If there are 10 members of the household, 10 candles each night. The Mahadrin, Mina Mahadrin, the people who do the mitzvah in the most outstanding way, so on the first night they light 1 candle, the second night 2, the third night 3, so on the final night they light 8. According to many Rishonim, the Rambam among them, this lighting of candles is one set of candles for the entire household. It isn't that every individual lights 1 and then lights 2 and then lights 3. The entire family lights 1. That is the prevalent custom among the Sephardim even today. Now, if you think about this for a moment, there is a break-even point. In other words, if you light candles that way, 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, 7, and 8, you end up using 36 candles over the course of Hanukkah. With the Shamas, add another 8, 44 candles. That's why a standard box of Hanukkah candles has 44 candles. There's no wiggle room, nothing to spare. You need every last candle. But that's 44 candles. But if you think about it for a second, at a certain point, if you're lighting 1 candle per member of the household, so if you have 3 members of the household with the shamas, so that's 4 per night, so 4 times 8 is 32. But once you have 4 members of the household plus the shamas, so it's 5 candles per night, it's already 40 candles. If you have 6, then with the shamas it's 7 per night, times 8 is 56. You're using more candles. So now if I ask you the question, so what's better to do? Is it better to light ner l'chol echad v'echad, a candle for each member of the household? Or is it better to light 1 menorah, starting with 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth? Well, the Talmud says, lighting ner l'chol echad v'echad is only mahadrin. That's a beautification of the mitzvah. Adding each successive night is mahadrin mina mahadrin. It's a greater beautification of the mitzvah, even though you end up using fewer candles beyond a certain point. Because once you have 6 people in the family, 5 or 6 people in the family, you'll be using fewer candles as mahadrin mina mahadrin than you would if you were simply a mahadrin. Because the issue is not the number of candles. The issue is what the candles represent. So if the question is, should I light a number of candles that represents the members of the household, or should I light a number of candles which represents the day of the Yontif, Chazal said that the latter is preferable to the former. So less is more. You're using fewer candles, but it's a greater symbolism. And this is something we have to know, that it's not the expense, it's not the number, it's not the size. When we talk about symbols, we talk about the meaning of the thing. A smaller thing, fewer things, can be a more powerful symbol. The Torah tells us that a carbon ola, a burnt offering, can come from various species of animals. A person can bring a bull as a carbon ola, a par, a shore, or you can bring a sheep. A sheep is much smaller than a bull. So one might have thought that a bull is a big carbon. That's a grand carbon. A sheep is a lesser carbon. It's a smaller carbon, not as significant. But we'll see that it may not be so. It may not be so at all. Let me share with you an amazing thing that the Chassam Sofer writes. It's a little technical, but when we delve into his words, we'll see some amazing insight. As we know that there are certain karbonos whose purpose is for atonement. Later in the parasha, we read about the carbon chatas, the sin offering, or the carbon asham, the guilt offering. These are karbonos that are brought if a person committed certain sins. He's obligated to atone by bringing a sacrifice. In certain instances, it's a carbon chata, certain instances, it's a carbon asham, but these sacrifices are for the purpose of atonement. Carbon ola can be brought voluntarily. It's not if a person committed a sin, he's obligated to bring the sacrifice. A person can volunteer to bring a carbon ola. It's a donation, if you will. Yet, the verse says that it also atones. The carbon ola, the burnt offering, also is an atonement. It's not an obligatory atonement. The person bringing the carbon brings it voluntarily, but it happens to be that one of the fringe benefits of bringing the sacrifice is that it does atone. The verse says, "V'nir tzolo l'chaper olav," that the carbon will be accepted as an atonement. So it's not an obligatory atonement. You're not obligated to bring the sacrifice. I guess you can live without the atonement, but if you bring the sacrifice, it does atone for a certain sin. And what does it atone for? So here we have a contradiction in Chazal. There's a contradiction between the Medrash and the Gemara. The Medrash says that the carbon ola atones for hirhure avera, illicit thoughts, illicit, sinful thoughts. Let's say, for example, a person passes by a place where sinful things are being eaten, or sinful things are being done. And he says to himself, boy, that would be really great. I would like to do that. And the person stops himself. No, can't do that. It's forbidden. But in the meantime, he had an illicit thought. That's called the hirhur aveira. That also requires an atonement. Just wanting to commit a sin is not kosher. So that requires a kapara, requires an atonement. And the Medrash Tanchuma says that is what the carbon ola atones for. It atones for hirhure aveira, thoughts of a sin. And the Medrash learns us from a verse, like a very interesting verse in Yechezkel. It's a play on words. It says in the verse, "Ha'ola al ruchachem," that which rose up upon your mind. The Navi says that which you were thinking, don't think it. So the Medrash, in a play on words, understands ha'ola, the carbon ola, al ruchachem. It comes for the illicit thought that you had in your mind. So that's what a carbon ola atones for. It atones for illicit thoughts. That's one opinion. Now, the other opinion, which the Gemara says, that it atones for what is called a lav hanitik la'aseh. Now this is a complex concept. We know that mitzvahs fall into two categories. There are mitzvahs aseh, positive commands, and mitzvahs lo aseh, negative commands. If a person violates a negative command deliberately, on purpose, so the punishment is usually malchus, lashes. But there are many, many exceptions to this rule. There are almost more cases that are exceptions than cases covered by the rule. The rule is that the punishment for a low sas is malchus, but there are many exceptions. For example, a lav shem ba ma'aseh, if the violation does not involve an act, there's no malchus. So, for example, there's no lashes for speaking lashon hara, even though it's a negative prohibition. But since it doesn't involve an action, it's only words, There's no malchus for that. Phew. Baruch Hashem for that. Now, there's another type of exception, which is called lav hanitak la'aseh. This is a negative violation, which the Torah tells us that if you violate it, you rectify it by performing a positive command. So the example of this is that if a person leaves the meat of a carbon overnight, that's a negative prohibition. Lo so siru mimenu ad boker. Don't leave it until morning. So there are no lashes for that prohibition for two reasons. One reason, because it's ein b'maisa, it involves no action. But even without that, there's an additional reason there's no malchus, because it's nitak liaseh. It is given over to a positive commandment. The Torah says that if you violate this prohibition and you leave the meat overnight, there is a mitzvah to burn it. That's a positive command. So a negative command, which is given over to a positive command, is also an exception. No lashes for that. That's called the lav hanitak la'aseh, a negative commandment which is given over to a positive commandment. The reason there are no lashes is because what the Torah really is telling us is that the positive commandment is the rectification of the negative. You rectify the violation by fulfilling the positive commandment. There's no need for any other punishment. But, says the Gemara, that the carbon ola atones for that, which seems to imply that the fulfillment of the positive commandment isn't a 100% cleansing. You need a little bit more, and that's what the carbon ola atones for. So we have two opinions. One is that the carbon ola atones for an illicit thought, and the other opinion is that it atones for an actual violation, a violation which is partially rectified by the fulfillment of the positive command, but nevertheless there's a residue which requires more atonement, and that's what the ola atones for. So it's a contradiction. So the Chassam Sofer says an amazing thing. The Chassam Sofer says that there's a difference here between the ola that comes from cattle and the ola that comes from sheep. The ola that comes from cattle atones for the lav hanitak la'aseh, and the ola that comes from sheep atones for the illicit thought. Now, you can understand this on many levels. The simplest level would be, what's worse, an illicit thought or an illicit deed? We think a deed is worse than an illicit thought. Which is a bigger sacrifice? A bull is bigger than a sheep. So therefore, the smaller carbon, the sheep, atones for the smaller sin. The larger carbon, the bull, atones for the larger sin. That would be the simple explanation. But I think there's a deeper explanation over here. Now, Rav Hirsch, in his commentary, asks the question, what is the difference between the ola that comes from cattle and the ola that comes from sheep? Like, when does the person decide to bring one, and when does he decide to bring the other? So we'd be tempted to say, if he can afford it, he brings the bigger. If he can't afford it, he brings the smaller. Rav Hirsch says something different. And let me put his words into a context so we can understand what he's getting at. Because we know that the idea of a carbon generally is a vicarious self-sacrifice. Well, this is an idea which many of the commentators explain. In other words, really, when a person brings a carbon, he is offering himself to God. Why is there a need to offer himself to God? Well, apparently, if he has sinned, he's become estranged from God to some extent, and now he is offering his service to God, if you will. Here I am, reporting for duty. I've been derelict in the past, I haven't lived up to my responsibility, but now I'm ready to do exactly what God wants. So how do I demonstrate that? How do I show that I'm reporting for duty, that now I'm going to be 100% devoted to God's will? So symbolically, I offer myself. Because I'm telling God that really, if you would ask that of me, I would do that too. If you would ask me to sacrifice myself, I'd be willing to do that. But you don't want that. But vicariously, I offer myself to you through the animal. So the whole symbolism of the carbon is the person identifying with the animal. The animal is in my place. The animal is in my stead. Now this is the significance, by the way, of one of the steps in the ritual. One of the steps in the ritual of bringing a carbon is called semicha, is the laying of hands on the animal's head. And the Gemara says that semicha is b'chol kocho. When you perform semicha, you don't just put your hands on the animal's head. You actually put your entire weight on the animal. To the extent that if the animal would pull its head away, you would fall on the floor. You put your entire weight on the animal's head. So what's the idea of that? The idea is you're transferring yourself to the animal. You are investing all of your being in that animal's head. That's the idea of putting your entire weight on the animal. Now that animal is you. That animal is you. That cow is Eliezer Breitowitz. That sheep is Eliezer Breitowitz. And during the ritual, as the Kehanim slaughter it and sprinkle its blood and skin it and butcher it and arrange the pieces on the altar as they're burnt, I see this as a vicarious self-sacrifice. I'm offering myself to God symbolically through the medium of the animal. So let's take it a step further. If sometimes a person brings a sheep, and sometimes a person brings a bull, that means that sometimes a person sees himself as a bull, and sometimes a person sees himself as a sheep. Now what's the question? When does a person see himself as the one, and when does he see himself as the other? Now this is a tricky thing, because none of us ever have been sheep or bulls, so how do we know what it means? So first offers the following conjecture. He says that a bull is a beast of burden. It carries a yoke. It carries a yoke. A sheep doesn't carry a yoke. A sheep is nurtured. The shepherd tends to the sheep. He nurtures the sheep. So obviously a person who sees himself as a bull is very different than a person who sees himself as a sheep. So the first says like this. The first says that, let's say you have a responsibility, you have a job. You have a job. You're hired to do a job. You have certain tasks that you must do. You must do X, Y, Z. Are you obligated to like it? Are you obligated to enjoy it? Are you obligated to appreciate it? No, that's your business. That's your problem. You like it, you don't like it, but you have to do your job. That's what an employee, a person who's hired, has to do. It's not his duty to love what he's doing. It's not his duty to appreciate what he's doing. His duty is to do his job. That's what a bull is. Right? A bull carries a yoke. It pulls the plow. You think the bull likes that? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. We have no way of knowing. But it does its duty. Right? Sometimes if we could ask the bull, tell me, did you enjoy doing that? I would say, are you kidding? I hated it every day. I remember, this comes to mind, I don't know, it's so silly that it fell into my head, that when I was sitting Shiva for my father, so one of the people that came to Menachem Avol to come to visit us was the man who was the family barber for decades. Now this is the man, I got my hair cut by him so many times. You know, had all those interesting conversations you have in the barber's chair, you know, talking about nothing. But this was one of the first times I really had an opportunity to talk to him. So I said to him, I said, tell me, I said, did you enjoy being a barber? I asked him. So he said, I hated every minute of it. So he says, really? I said, why did you do it? He says, you know, he came, he's an immigrant, he came after the war, what could he do? What could he do? He figured he could cut hair. So that's what he did. So he hated every minute of it. So if you ask the bull, right, okay, you pulled the plow, you pulled the wagon, did you enjoy it? Did you appreciate it? So the bull would I hated every minute of it, but why did you do it? I did my job. I have a job, I have responsibility. When a Jew sees that he's been irresponsible, he hasn't lived up to his obligations with divine service, and he's not yet at the point where he feels beholden to love the mitzvahs and to love God, but he understands at least that he has a responsibility, he has a duty that he has to perform. So he sees himself as a bull. I was meant to be a bull, and I wasn't a bull. I didn't carry the yoke. So he wants to atone. So what does he do? He brings the ola of a bull. That's what Rosh says. It says a sheep is more than a bull. See, a sheep is not just he does what he does out of a sense of duty. A sheep is nurtured. A sheep is cared for. The shepherd tends to the sheep. You know, the sheep feels an indebtedness. The sheep feels that he's been pampered, that he owes something in return. But if a person sees himself as a sheep, it's not just that he sees that I've been irresponsible in living up to my duty. A person who sees himself as a sheep sees himself as a person who's the object of God's love and who owes something in return, who has to pay back, who has to reciprocate with love. That's the sheep. So the Rosh says that the ola of the sheep is really a greater carbon than the ola of the bull. The person who brings a bull is saying, listen, I haven't done my duty, now I recommit myself to do my duty. I will be a bull. I will carry the yoke. Will I like it? I'm not promising to like it. I'm not saying I don't like it. I will be a dutiful bull. I will carry the yoke. I won't cast off the yoke. I'll do what I'm told. I'll live up to my responsibilities. I'll live up to my obligations. That's what I'll be. So when the person brings the bull as a carbon, that's what he's declaring, Rosh says. He says, until this point I haven't been, but now I offer my services as the bull. Am I going to like it? Am I going to appreciate it? Will I resent it? Maybe I'll resent it. But I will live up to my duty. I'll be a bull. I'll carry the yoke. The person brings the sheep. He's saying, I'm a sheep. I've been nurtured by God. God is my shepherd. He's taking care of me. I reciprocate. I respond with love, with caring. It's a much loftier offering. A sheep is less expensive than a bull. That's the point. When we talk about symbolism, it's not the idea that the more expensive it is, or the bigger it is, or the more it weighs, the better it is. When we talk about symbolism, sometimes a smaller thing means more. Okay? That's what Rosh says, that the oila of a sheep means much more than the oila of a bull. So taking these categories of Rosh and applying them to the words of the Chassam Sofer, this is what I would say. I would say the person who is on the level of the bull feels that he has to atone for acts that violate halacha. He hasn't lived up to his duty. But an illicit thought? What, I shouldn't even have illicit thoughts? The person on the level of the bull doesn't think that way. Well, I have to atone for it because I wanted something else? That's part of my job? I even have to think right? That much I don't have to do. I have to do the right thing. I don't have to think the right thing. So the sheep, the person who's the sheep, who has been the recipient of God's love, for him it's a betrayal of God even to think of the wrong thing. How could I even think of going contrary to the will of my benefactor? And therefore says the Chassam Sofer that it's the ola of the sheep that atones for the illicit thought, and the ola of the bull that atones for the illicit act, the lavanitikla assay. It's an amazing, amazing thing the Chassam Sofer says. Now the Chassam Sofer points out a very interesting thing that follows from this. Now, one of the ad halachas of a carbon ola is that a carbon ola is slaughtered on the north side of the mizbeach, the north side of the altar. Other types of karbanos can be slaughtered anywhere, but the holiest of the karbanos are slaughtered on the north side of the altar. So the question is, what does north symbolize? We'll come to that in a moment. Where does the Torah say this? The Torah says this explicitly with regards to the ola of the sheep. Now the Gemara learns by a comparison, by one of the methods of interpretation, that the halacha applies as well to the ola of the bull, but it's written explicitly with regards to the ola of the sheep. And the Chassam Sofer takes that to mean that somehow this halacha, that you slaughter it on the north side, somehow is more closely related to the Ola of the sheep than the Ola of the bull. So why would that be? We don't know what this halacha means in the first place, but whatever it means, why is it more closely associated to the sheep Ola than to the bull Ola? So some say like this: what does Safon mean? Safon is north, but Safon also means concealed and hidden. You see, the four directions in Hebrew: Safon, Darom, north-south; Safon, Darom, Mizrach, and Ma'arav relate to the motions of the sun. I don't know what north, south, east, and west mean. I don't think they mean anything, right? But the Hebrew names for the directions have great meaning. Mizrach, the word Zorach means to shine. Mizrach is the place where the sun rises, where the sun shines from. Now, if you know about the sun ultimately ends up in the west. The transit from east to west, what is the verb in Hebrew for passing? Avar. And sometimes you have transposition of letters. So Ma'arav, which is a transposition of Ma'avar, is the place to which the sun passes. So it starts in Mizrach, that's the place where the sun shines, and it ends up in Ma'arav, Ma'avar, which is the place to which it passes. Now, this is something that we said many times, we've explained. The sun does not travel from east to west overhead. That's not the path the sun takes. The sun travels in a circle, right? It rises in the east, it travels to the south, and then along the west. In other words, if I were to ask you at high noon, where is the sun? So many people think the sun is directly overhead at high noon. No, it's not directly overhead. The sun is at its highest point at noon, but it's due south. Because if you stand facing south, the sun is directly ahead of you at the highest point in the sky. That's where the sun is at noon. Because it rose in the east, and it travels in a semicircle to the south, then ultimately it sets in the west. The difference between summer and winter is that the circle that the sun follows in summer is longer. The sun rises in the northeast, then travels all along the east to the south and sets in the northwest, much longer arc. That's what the day is that much longer. And in the winter, it rises closer to the southeast, goes due south, and then ultimately sets in the southwest, a much shorter arc. So Mizrach is where the sun shines from. Ma'arav is where the sun passes to. Darom, which is south, is Dar-Rom. That's where the sun dwells on high. Dar-Rom. Dar means to dwell. Rom means, in Hebrew, on high. That's the highest point of the sun. The only direction along which the sun does not travel is the north, and that's Safon. Safon means Safun, it's hidden. From there the sun is hidden. And we are not conscious of these things to a great extent because we have, Baruch Hashem, we have heat and we have air conditioning. So the orientation of our homes is not that important, but I know that you can notice these things. For example, my house is oriented north-south. I'm on a street that goes north-south. So in the winter, the snow does not melt, right, on the north side of the house, right? Because the sun shines in the south, not on the north. So if you go down streets, for example, that run east-west, you'll see an amazing thing. That on one side of the street, the roofs will have snow, and the other side of the roofs don't have snow, because the sun shines from the south, not from the north. In any case, north is Safon. So the Chassam Sofer says that since Safon means north, it also relates to the idea of something being hidden. Something which is hidden. Thoughts are hidden. They're not revealed to anybody else. In modern Hebrew, you have this. What's the word for conscience in modern Hebrew? Come on, somebody. In modern Hebrew, what's the word for conscience? Is matzpun. Is conscience. It's matzpun. It's like safun. It's something hidden. Your conscience is hidden. Unless you're one of those people who bears his soul to everybody and tells everybody exactly what he's thinking. But a regular person who keeps that to himself, so your conscience is your matzpun. It's hidden. So tzafon is related to the hidden things. So it says the Chassam Sofer, since it is the sheep which atones for the illicit thoughts, that's why it is a connection to tzafon, which is the hidden side. But it atones for that sin which is hidden from people, which is tzafon. That's what the Chassam Sofer says. An amazing, amazing, amazing thing. But the point is this, that when we talk about symbolism is not a question of how much you spend, it's not a question of how big it is, and what it means. This is really this has a corollary, by the way, in life, that when you have to buy a present for somebody, and you agonize, what should I get that person? Should I get this? Should I get that? Should I get the other thing? Get the other thing? And then finally you go and say, well, I'll just give the person a check, right? And they'll do whatever they want with it, or a gift certificate. So on the one hand, maybe it's better to give a check than to give something which you're not going to use. But on the other hand, a carefully selected present means so much more. Even if it really is less, right? The difference between a present that was selected very, 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 very carefully, very meaningfully, something which is totally suited to that person, as opposed to something which is very, very expensive, or maybe just a big check. Right? It's not that, well, this is more money than that's worth. Money is money. So you gave me money, right? But here, it's something. It was thoughtful. It was thought out. It was something that was personalized for me. That has much more meaning. And that's the idea. When we talk about something being symbolic, it has nothing to do with its value, nothing to do with its size. The question is, what is the meaning that underlies it? That's what really the Chassam Sofer is telling us, that the sheep is a bigger carbon than the bull. Right? The meaning of it is much more significant, much more deep, more profound. Now the Chassam Sofer goes down and says another amazing thing. As I mentioned, the halach is the carbon ola is slaughtered in the north. There's another carbon which is slaughtered in the north. The carbon chatas is also slaughtered in the north. It says in the pasuk, "B'makom asher tishachet ha'ola tishachet ha'chatas." That where the ola is slaughtered, there the chatas should be slaughtered. It's also slaughtered in the north. So why should that be? If you think about it for a second, a carbon chatas is the exact opposite of a carbon ola. When does a person bring a carbon chatas? A carbon chatas is brought for a person who committed a sin inadvertently, thoughtlessly, meaning the person ate something forbidden, the person ate chaylev, forbidden fat, or ate blood, without realizing it. Thought it was eating something kosher, it turned out he really was eating blood or eating fat. So you bring a carbon chatas. So the carbon chatas is the exact opposite of the carbon ola. The carbon chatas is an illicit act with no illicit intention. The ola of the sheep is the illicit thought which never translated itself into an action. So if the whole idea of tzafayim is by the ola of the sheep, because it's the hidden side, and therefore it relates to a sin in the realm of thought, it would seem that that's the last place in the world where you bring a carbon chatas. A carbon chatas is the exact opposite. A carbon chatas is a sin of action which doesn't involve. The thoughts are totally innocent. It's mamish the exact opposite of the carbon ola. So why are they slaughtered in the same place? Now the Gemara really talks about this, and the Gemara gives an answer which now makes sense. The Gemara says that the whole reason that the carbon chatas is slaughtered there, right, is really that no one should know that he's bringing a chatas. People should think maybe he's bringing an ola, it'd be less embarrassing. In other words, the argument seems to go as follows. If anything, where should the chatas be brought? The chatas should be brought in the south, because the chatas really is a carbon, a sin that involved an action where the thoughts were innocent. So everything is revealed, everything is out in the open. So I would have said the ola should be specifically in the north, the chatas should be specifically in the south. And therefore any observer will see, oh, he's going to the north, that's an ola. He's going to the south, that's a chatas. So therefore, to avoid embarrassment, the Torah said, bring the karbanos in the same place, all in the north. That's what the Gemara says. The Chassam Sofer says an amazing thing. The Chassam Sofer says, how does it come to pass that a person should commit a sin inadvertently? The person doesn't want to commit a sin. If he'd know, he wouldn't do it. So how does it come about that he should commit the sin? Why doesn't God protect him from himself? The verse says, Ragle chasidov yishmor, that God protects the feet of the righteous. He protects the righteous from committing sins that they would not want to do. So how does it happen that a person commits a sin that he didn't want to do? His thoughts are innocent, his thoughts are pure, yet he commits the sin. The answer is, says Chassam Sofer, must be that he really wanted to do it. Deep down, he's been thinking about, wouldn't that be fun? Wouldn't that be good? Wouldn't I enjoy that? So of course he never acted upon his illicit thought, but since he has been tempted and he wants to, so therefore God doesn't protect him from himself. God says, well, this is what you want. I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to protect you. I'm not going to save you from yourself. I will let you have what you want, as damaging as it is for you. And therefore says the Chassam Sofer that in reality, any person that commits a sin which is liable for a chatas, which means he eats the forbidden food without realizing it, it must be because on an earlier occasion he had a desire for it, and therefore God did not protect him. And therefore says Chassam Sofer, that's why the carbon is brought b'tzafon also, because even the person who is a chatas really is not atoning for the forbidden act, he's atoning for that illicit thought that brought him to the act. Amazing, amazing insight. But this is the idea of the symbolism of the karbanos. Now we don't have karbanos nowadays. So the Gemara says, it's a verse, we make up for the karbanos that we don't have with our prayers. With our prayers. And we know that the Gemara tells us that the daily prayers that we say were connected to midum tiknum. These were ordained to make up for the sacrifices that we brought in temple times. Rav Hirsch has a long essay. There's a little book he wrote called Jewish Symbolism. And he has a long essay. We're not going to go into it in detail, but he just makes an amazing observation. You know, in the Shemona Esrei that we pray, there are three sections. You have the three opening blessings, and you have the three concluding blessings, and you have 13 blessings in the middle. Right? Shemona Esrei, which means 18, is really a misnomer. Nowadays, our Shemona Esrei has 19 blessings. The 19th was added later. So the first three, these are blessings of praise. It's proper. Before you address the king, you should praise him and butter him up, if you will. So they should be inclined to answering your requests. In the end, you have to thank him. Those are the final three blessings. And those are constant. Those you say on the weekdays, on Shabbos, on Yom Tov, on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. The first three blessings, the last three blessings are always intact. The middle changes. So on Shabbos and Yom Tov, you don't have the 13 middle blessings because the Gemara says Shabbos and Yom Tov, Chazal gave us a break. But on weekdays, there are 13 middle blessings. 13, of course, is a symbolic number in Judaism. But Rav Hirsch noticed an amazing thing. He noticed something which is just astounding. That with regards to the carbon tamid, the daily offering, which was a sheep, the number 13 is significant. The Mishnah says in Maseches Para, that the olah of sheep was performed by 13 priests. The sheep was cut up and it was brought to the altar by 13 priests. Between the parts of the olah, the accompanying flour, the accompanying wine, there were 13 priests that performed the ritual. So it first says that the 13 middle blessings correspond to the 13 priests, the 13 parts of the carbon tamid. It's an amazing, amazing thing. But this is the idea. We make up for the prayers, with the prayers, for the sacrifices that we don't bring. The question we have to ask ourselves is, how do prayers make up for a sacrifice? How do prayers make up for a sacrifice? A sacrifice, as we said, is symbolic. The animal replaces me. It replaces me. But if I have prayers, where's the element of sacrifice? How could a prayer make up? What am I sacrificing? If anything, to the contrary. A prayer almost seems to be self-serving. I come to God with a list of things. I want this, please give me this, please give me this. It's not sacrifice, it's almost self-service. I'm presenting a list of requests. How could that be what sense is it a sacrifice? I want to share an idea with you, and this is something that, if we think about it, it may shape the nature of our prayers. The Ramchal in the Sefer Derech Hashem talks about the purpose of prayer. What is the function of prayer? Why does God ask us to pray to Him? So he says an amazing thing. He says that God gave man the ability to attend to his own needs, lichvodo, in order to give honor to the human being. Now, at first glance, this is a very cryptic thing, because we learn the Chumash, we get the impression that man's having to attend to his own needs is a curse. That after the sin in the Garden of Eden, God cursed man and said, "B'zeh asapecha te'echal lechem." By the sweat of your brow you'll eat bread. This is a curse. Until now, everything came to you effortlessly. Now, after the sin, as a consequence, you have to work for a living. You're going to sweat. You're going to toil. So how could the Ramchal say this idea that this is for the sake of the dignity, the honor of man, that he should attend to his own needs? The truth is that it's really based on the Gemara. The Gemara says an amazing thing. The Gemara, discussing these verses, says the following: that when God said to Adam, He said, first, "Kotz v'dardar tatzmiach loch," thorns and thistles will grow. V'ochalto as esav asada, you'll eat the grass of the field. That's what God initially told man. You'll eat the grass of the field. So at that point, Zolgu ein of the most. Adam Harishon burst into tears. And he said, Ani v'chamori yochlu be'evos echad, that I and my donkey are going to eat at one trough? I mean, if I'm going to eat grass, what does that mean? That means that side by side, my donkey and myself, we're going to sit, our heads will be in the trough, and we're going to eat grass? So it was a humiliation. So God said, okay, I take it back. By the sweat of your brow, you'll eat bread. Meaning you won't eat grass like an animal, you'll eat bread. And the Gemara points out that in many ways we would have been better off had we stuck with God's plan A. In other words, we're pampered, we're spoiled. Because we're human beings, we don't want to live like animals. An animal lives in a barn, sleeps on the ground, eats grass, and he's perfectly content. Says we have to have a nice house, decorated furniture. We have to have good things to eat, nice car, nice clothing. There's a price to pay for that. Right? To have all those good things, you have to work hard. You have to undergo a lot of stress. So we'd be better off without it. But God understood that we need this for our self-respect, for our dignity. And that we shouldn't feel that we are animals. God said that you'll have to work, but you'll be able to live on a higher standard. And that would be an expression of your underlying humanity. That's what God said. So therefore, God gave us the talents, the abilities, the wherewithal to be able to attend to our needs with effort, with stress. That's true. In order that we should have dignified lives. But, says the Ramchal, this blessing, so to speak, of self-sufficiency has a downside, which is that a person can delude himself into thinking that he really is self-sufficient. I can take care of myself. I don't need anybody. Don't need anything. Don't need God either. Therefore, there is a corrective which God built into life to create a balance, and that's prayer. Prayer is the opportunity to remind us that we are not self-sufficient, and it's an amazing thing because this insight of the Ramchal turns the whole thing on its head. Because when do we tend to pray? We tend to pray when we are helpless. Like when we really are helpless, there's nothing I can do, so now I start praying, right? But as long as there's something I can do, I don't need to pray. I can take care of myself. The Ramchal tells us the exact opposite. Prayer was invented precisely for the times that I am not helpless, to remind me that I am dependent on God. Because when I'm really helpless, I don't need the Torah to obligate me to pray. I'll pray on my own when I'm really helpless. When the Torah obligates me to pray, it's not when I feel helpless, it's when I feel I'm in the driver's seat. I'm in control. That's when God says, no, don't make a mistake. Now you have to pray. So the truth is that prayer is really the biggest sacrifice that we make. In other words, I'm a person, I have an ego, I'm proud of my accomplishments, I'm proud of my abilities. I tell myself I can take care of myself as long as God doesn't interfere. I'll take care of myself. And I'm self-sufficient. Right? That's a little arrogant, but that's what most people are. Now, I tell them, but I don't think that way. That's not true. I recognize that I am, in reality, helpless. You want to know an amazing thing? Isn't it an amazing thing? What do you do with your hands when you daven? If you're holding the siddur, okay, you're holding the siddur. Let's say you don't have to hold the siddur. Let's say you have a table in front of you, you put the siddur down. So what do you do with your hands when you pray? So the Gemara says that you hold your hands together. You hold your hands together. So what is the idea? Why should this be the posture of prayer, that you hold your hands together? So the Ran says in Masechah Shabbos, the reason you hold your hands is to show you have no hands. You're helpless. Imagine a person that had no hands. Like, look, man, no hands. If you had no hands, what would you be able to do? Nothing. Couldn't fend for yourself if you had no hands. Because a person who is an amputee with no hands, no legs, is totally dependent on everybody else. You have legs, you have hands, you can take care of yourself. So if we're standing before God, we're trying to declare before God that I am utterly dependent on you. So what is the posture? It's the posture of a person who has no hands. So you don't hold your hands apart, you don't gesture with your hands. That means I have hands. You hold them together. Because I have no hands. It's as if I have no hands. I'm totally dependent and reliant on you. That's what the proper posture of prayer should be. There's a tshuva from the Tzitz Eliezer who says that it really makes no difference. And that's the symbolism, whether you hold your hands together in front of you or you hold your hands together behind you. It really makes no difference. Now, some people say that it has to be only in front of you. The main thing is that you hold your hands together. You hold it behind you, you hold it in front of you, it's sort of the same thing. But the point is that that's what we're doing when we're praying. There is no greater sacrifice than that. There's no greater sacrifice than that.
Why is that sacrifice?
Right? Because what is the idea of sacrifice? The idea of sacrifice is, right, I'm declaring my total dependence on God. I am nothing without him. Everything comes from him, and therefore I am of necessity 100% devoted to his will. That is the greatest carbon that there can be. Right? In fact, one could argue, and the Rambam really seems to say this in the Moreh Nevuchim, that really prayer is really the fundamental form of avoda, and even the animal sacrifice is only secondary. In other words, animal sacrifice is only avoda on the level of symbolism, but prayer is avoda in actuality. So it isn't that somehow the prayer mysteriously replaces the carbon. Almost the other way. Is that the essential avoda is tefillah, is prayer. So it could be on a symbolic level through animal sacrifice. But the real sacrifice, the real avoda, is prayer. And that's what it is. Prayer is our opportunity to declare before HaKadosh Baruch Hu our being utterly dependent on him, yes?
So when there was the Beit HaMikdash stood, people still prayed as well?
The Rambam says it was a mitzvah to say everyone had to pray.
And when the third Beit HaMikdash
Right.
will be rebuilt?
In fact, it was more than that. When the Beit HaMikdash stood, korbanos were brought. But korbanos were brought only in the Beit HaMikdash. Only there. Right? So it was very limited. There was one central location. You had to come there. You couldn't do it across the countryside. Prayer took place everywhere. Prayer took place everywhere. Every Jew had to pray. But the idea is that prayer has a meaning and a significance which maybe even goes beyond animal sacrifice. It's the ultimate sacrifice. It's the ultimate declaration of my dependence and therefore my being obligated to the Ribono Shel Olam.
When you're saying prayer, you're saying formalized prayer, Shemona Esrei, or you're saying...
You know, the formalized prayer is the Rambam says, was really an ordinance for the times. It was really the prayer should express your own feelings. I mean, as a rule, anything which is vicarious is less meaningful. So, if I pray using someone else's words, is that really what I feel? Well, to the extent that I reflect on the words and I think about the words and I agree with the words, it is. But really, ideally, the prayer should be my own. But Chazal recognize how difficult that is. Who is eloquent enough to feel comfortable speaking to God? So, the time came that people were loath to pray. Think about it for a second. Imagine if I would tell you, okay, you have in 15 minutes the opportunity to pray to God. This is your one chance of a lifetime to express your feelings to God. I mean, where would you start? Where would you start? You wouldn't know what to do. So the Chazal saved us and said, okay, just follow this text. Concentrate, think about it. But the ideal prayer would be a prayer that we composed on our own. We can't do that. The second best is to use the prayer that echoes the words of the great people who were so close to God. But this is the idea of prayer. So it's true that we yearn in Yemos HaMashiach to have the animal sacrifice because symbolism is a powerful vehicle. But we don't have to feel that we don't have opportunities for genuine avoda today. That's what prayer can be. Of course, prayer, like many things in life, rarely realizes its potential. As we go to shul and like the poster sometimes says, if you go to shul to talk, when do you daven? Sadly, that's what happens. But there's one thing we have to remind ourselves. Something the Balatanya says. Let's say a person goes to shul and he finds it very difficult to pray, difficult to concentrate, a lot of distractions. So what does that mean? What does that mean? What message is God sending you? So the Balatanya says an amazing thing. The message He's sending you is that your prayer is so precious to the Ribono Shel Olam that the Yetzer Hara is sending all sorts of obstacles to prevent it from being said. But think about that. The Yetzer Hara has nothing better to do than to prevent you from davening. So he sends you friends to talk to, and he sends you things to think about, and he sends you problems to worry about, and he sends you an interesting article in the shul bulletin to examine. And all the things the Yetzer Hara could be, operating in Las Vegas on the Strip, really getting people to do terrible things. And all it has to do is get you not to daven, right? Anything better to do with his effort, time? The answer is no, because your prayer is so precious to the Ribono Shel Olam that that's the best use of the Yetzer Hara's energy, right? To prevent you from davening. But if you think about that for a moment, so you'll be filled with tremendous strength, tremendous energy. That if this prayer is so chashuv, so important to the Ribono Shel Olam, that the Yetzer Hara has to exert so much effort, then at least I have to try and overcome that and really pray seriously. And hopefully that our prayer should be considered as pleasing in the Ribono Shel Olam's eyes as a genuine carbon. Because one announcement I'll make next week, I will not be here next week, right? But 2 weeks from tonight I will be here. Okay, so taking a week off, I can be away at a simcha. And but 2 weeks is the Monday before Pesach. So we will meet. If anyone is still cleaning, I give you a dispensation right off the bat now. I'm not going to take attendance, but if there are any menfolk in the house who are good for nothing, just send them to this year. And they'll come. And so that's 2 weeks from tonight, but next week, 1 week tonight, there won't be a class.